Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of A Closer Look on Mongolia. My name is Simona Grano and I'm Senior Lecturer and Director of the Taiwan Studies Project at the University of Zurich. I will be your moderator for today. A Closer Look is a series by the Asian Society of Switzerland with the support of BDO and the Institute of Asia and Oriental Studies at the University of Zurich, shedding lights on different Asian countries through the eyes of leading local voices. So first of all, some basic information on the country. Mongolia is located deep within the interior of Eastern Asia, far away from any ocean, and it is the world's most sparsely populated country, covering an area only slightly smaller than Iran, but with a significantly smaller population, 3 million in comparison to Iran's 85 million. Nearly half of the population actually lives in the capital, Ulaanbaatar. The Mongols are ethnically quite homogeneous. Within Mongolia, Khalkha Mongols constitute some 4/5 of the population. Other Mongolian groups account for nearly half of the rest of the population, and much of the remainder consists of Turkish-speaking peoples, mainly Kazakhs. The vast majority of the population speaks Mongolian, and nearly all of those who speak another language likewise do understand Mongolian. Under Soviet influence in the 1940s, the Mongolian script was actually replaced by a Cyrillic script. Approximately half of Mongolians today are Buddhists and 40% are non-religious, with the remaining 10% composed of Christians, shamanists, and others. Mongolia ranks 99 out of 189 countries in terms of the Human Development Index. This is a measure generated by the UN based on lifespan, education level, and gross national income per capita. It is not far behind China, ranked as number 85, but actually ranks much lower than neighboring and nearby countries such as Russia and Kazakhstan. Now I'll give you some information on the geography. Here comes the slide, and the economy. So Mongolia has a clear continental climate with long, cold winters and short, cool to hot summers. Its scenery consists largely of upland steppes, semi-deserts and deserts, and in the west and the north, forested high mountain ranges alternate with lake-dotted basins. Now, Mongolia's economy, traditionally based on herding and agriculture, has transformed into an economy focused more on extractive industries, spurred on by significant investment by foreign enterprises. China and Russia are Mongolia's largest trading partners, together accounting for some 2/3 of the value of imports. Mongolia is actually an exceptionally resources-rich country. It has extensive reserves of coal and copper, in addition to gold, oil, natural gas, and uranium, and rare earth minerals. In 2016, metals and minerals accounted for almost 90% the export value. The burning of raw coal is the main cause of severe air pollution in Ulaanbaatar. 80% of air pollution in the city is generated from these poor ger districts, these are districts where people live in self-built homes and traditional tent-like dwellings and are called ger. We'll talk about that more with our two guests later on. These are lacking heating and water. And so these households actually burn large amounts of coal to keep warm in the winter. So in 2020, the worst air quality in the world was actually registered in Ulaanbaatar. Mongolia has actually tripled its GDP per capita over the past 30 years. However, growth has been highly volatile due to the country's high dependence on volatile commodity exports, and of course, also due to the business cycles of major trading partners. Compared to former Soviet republics, Mongolia performs better than poorer countries like Kyrgyzstan, but worse than wealthier ones like Kazakhstan. Despite general economic growth, the benefits are not reflected in the household level welfare. In 2018, nearly 30% of the population of Mongolia lived in poverty, with a further 15% at risk of poverty. Let me now give you some information on the history and on today's content on the conversation. After the collapse of the Mongol Empire, present-day Mongolia was colonized by the Chinese Empire in the 17th century. From 1921 until the end of the 1980s, Mongolia was a one-party state closely tied to the Soviet Union. It received technical, economic, and military assistance from the Soviet Union and generally followed Soviet guidance in the building of a socialist society. However, beginning in the 1990s, forces for change in Mongolia managed to end the monopoly of political power by the communists in favor of free multi-party elections, a coalition government, and transition to a market economy. While Mongolia has since then been regarded as an oasis of democratic stability, the political panorama is actually polarized with frequent allegations of corruption as well as of bribery. In 2021, Uknagin Kurelsuk was elected as Mongolia's 6th president, and all important political offices are currently held by a single party, the Mongolian People's Party, which has held a strong majority in the parliament since the year 2016. This has led observers to raise concerns about the direction in which Mongolia's democracy and multi-party system are actually heading. So let me now introduce the speakers for today. The first one is Oyungerel Tsedevdamba. Pardon for butchering your name so badly. She's a politician, a human rights activist, a public speaker, and an author. She served the Mongolian government for 20 years, including as an MP in the parliament and Minister of Culture, Sports, and Tourism. 15 years ago, she founded Local Solutions, an NGO dedicated to educate the public on sustainable solutions to global challenges that are, of course, also Mongolia's challenges. Oyungerel is also a co-author and of the best-selling novels The Green-Eyed Llama and 60 White Sheep, and many other non-fiction books, which we'll talk about later with her. And our second speaker for today is Byambajargal, aka Byambajargal Ayushjav. She's the founder of another non-governmental organization called Faro Foundation Mongolia, which is backed by Faro Education Center, one of the largest language training schools networks in Mongolia. As a strong advocate for public education and digital literacy, she founded Faro Foundation Mongolia to raise public awareness and run training programs on digital literacy. She is also a member of the board of directors of the American Chamber of Commerce in Mongolia. Welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Right, so let us get started with the first part of our conversation. I remind you that this part is actually just meant as an introduction, so your answers should be quite brief. If not, I will probably interrupt you, but I will try not to. So, Bimya, let's start with you. Where do you see Mongolia's strength, and what fascinates you most about Mongolia, and what concerns you most about your country?
Okay, so thank you for having us in the panel here. And then, yes, so where do I see strength in Mongolia is the youth, that a lot of Mongolian youth are studying abroad, coming back, very well educated and trying to help to develop the country. So in a way, our strength is relying on our youth. And also, we do have very young democracy, so which means we have big, wide space and room to adapt and transform our country in much more better directions. So that's the strength I see. And what fascinates me most about Mongolia is that resilience, between in Russia and China, and with the two biggest countries in bordering ourselves, and then the way we are living, maybe we do have a nomadic culture and nomadic blood in ourselves. That's why we are very resilient towards difficult situations. Somehow I see a lot of Mongolians overcoming a lot of challenges throughout the year, even with the COVID situation. So that's what I see. That's what fascinates me more. And to be honest, my concern is, as you, Simona, previously mentioned about in the PPT, about the poverty and also the education and health industry in Mongolia. Since the COVID, we have been struggling a lot. So those are the general concerns we have, and among all the publics here. So those are the ones that I would like to highlight here. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Bimya. These are wonderful topics that we'll actually address later on during the conversation with you as well, and with Oyungerel. Oyungerel, if I could ask you now to tell me, within just using a few words, how would you judge the current state of your country regarding society, the economy, and politics? You can also pick just one of these if you prefer.
Okay, thank you again. Good evening from Mongolia. Yes, in terms of society, Mongolian society is a very high literacy society. And we are quite dispersed, as you introduced in your introduction, but we are very eager to connect society because probably we are so spread out in this huge territory. We always have constant need to communicate. So it's very easy for Mongolians to learn languages, to adapt communication technologies, and to get just connected. And we are very excited to have internet, multiple languages, etc. So because of our high literacy and high interest in communications, we are quite a very active society, I would say. And also what fascinates me in Mongolian society is our traditional history, culture, and our language. And probably very few people speak Mongolia in terms of population in the world, but Mongolia, thanks to its own culture, its own language, and its own nomadic way of lifestyle, we actually remain surviving in the middle of this Eurasia. And many people wonder, how did Mongolia survive between two giant neighbors? How economically and how as a society it still exists. And lots of the answers really lie in our culture, in our tradition, in our lifestyle. So I am very fascinated by Mongolian lifestyle, Mongolian tradition and culture, and I'm very eager to transmit it to next generation. And I always talk about it to our people. But there is also weakness in our traditional culture. For example, because we've been a long way of long history, we were led by religious leaders, Buddhist leaders, and then by communist leaders. So by living under Buddhism and communism like over 300 years, what actually became an aspiration for average Mongolian person is something unmeasurable, immeasurable, and intangible. Like during Buddhist religious leadership, current life didn't matter because everything was for the afterlife. And during communist time, individual freedom, individual goal didn't matter because we all as a society were aspiring for communism that never reaches and is not measurable. So because we neglected our personal goals and personal measurable steps, we are actually in the mental transition stage as a society. So we have to change our mentality from immeasurable to measurable, from intangible aspiration to tangible goals, etc. So if we switch this transition, we will be very easily understood by Westerners, and we could also easily understand the Western business communications. So that kind of gap exists as a society.
Right. Thank you, Oyungerel. I think I look forward to hear more about that later on when we go into the in-depth in the discussion. Now, maybe Bimya, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about Mongolia?
Okay, so when it comes to, before I answer that, maybe I should like briefly say something about myself. So since I graduated high school, I've lived many countries for like almost like 1/3 of my life. I lived abroad. So when I said I come from Mongolia, they ask me like 3 things. So whether they ask me, do I know Genghis Khan? Yes, of course we know Genghis Khan. Every Mongolian has actually know. And then they ask me, do we ride horses in the city? Like if I want to go my high school, do I ride horse? And I would say, we do ride horses in the countryside. When the rural area kids go to school, they do. But when we live in the city, we can actually go to the school by walking or by a car. There is like any other country, we do have a same type of transportations. And they ask like, do we have electricity and do we live in yurt? So so those are the misconceptions we do have. Yes, in the countryside, we do live in a yurt. In the rural areas, we do live in a yurt, but in the city, like any other country, we do have electricity. We do have very high-tech technological like living devices, and then because Mongolia is such a vast country, And then because we live very like far from each other because we can, and because a lot of herder families live in the countryside, distance from the downtown, distance from the province and municipal, so they have to require this mode of transportations. But in a way, it's very interesting to understand the whole country as that picture that internet builds to us. But also I would like to acknowledge that we do have, like any other civilized society country, that we have up and running city as well,
urban life.
yeah. Yeah, and also there is a lot of misconceptions, like, oh, because you were bordering with Russia, so you guys must drink a lot of vodka, like, and
okay, that shows a lot about the ignorance of people asking you these questions, maybe. But I get your point, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like just any other country, we do have our own alcohol beverages, and it's up to people's choices. So it's not because we've been influenced by Russian a lot that we drink a lot of alcohol. And especially for I would also speak from the young generations. Since Miss Oyungerel here is also gonna discuss about the misconception here. We at the younger generation is not even drinking that much. So in a way, it's kind of like we're in a transition period. So those are the misconceptions I usually encounter. But now it's so given living in internet era, things are much more advanced, and people are not really having these kind of questions anymore. So.
Right. Thank you very much. And I think it's good that you also told us, what's your background. So we understand also why you established your NGO and why you put so much emphasis on, of course, digital literacy and education. And what about you, Oyungerel? What are the things that people should know in order to better understand your view and your perspective on your home country and on the topics we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I'm also speaking for a little differently from Byambajargal. Usually people who come to Mongolia, when they come to Mongolia during summertime, they misunderstand our weather. So for tourists, especially when I was Minister of Culture and Culture, Sports and Tourism, I had to write an article about what to dress and what to expect when traveling in Mongolia. Because when people from warmer countries, especially even from European countries, they don't have a big temperature shift between night and day. So if they think that it's 20 degrees during daytime, it should be 18 degrees at night. So that's why they underdress when they come to Mongolia during summer. But in Mongolia, temperature differences usually from day to night, it's usually at least 10 degrees, and at most it's 20, sometimes 30 degrees differences. So even though you are traveling in countryside in Mongolia, during daytime, you might feel very hot, like in a hot country, but during night, you will feel like you are in winter season in Europe. So that's why when people travel to Mongolia, they underdress, they underestimate the temperature difference of Mongolia. So Mongolian climate is, you said extreme continental, so that's extreme continental means that you have very different day temperature than your night temperature. You always have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. During 24 hours, you have to be prepared. So Mongolians are like soldiers. We live like soldiers because we always have everything ready for us. So when my foreign guests come to our place, they are not that much prepared. In that case, I would usually propose them to buy a Mongolian dale, like something like I'm wearing. So this kind of Mongolian traditional clothing is designed for that temperature changes. And even so, you are wearing nice sweater, for example, from Europe, it will not be enough during nighttime. Yeah. Nighttime. So you should always have something long, something has big space, and something you can just wrap yourself. Yeah, wrap yourself. And most importantly, Mongolian clothings are all designed to use your body warmth, your body temperature back to heat you, because Mongolian dales and Mongolian boots all have some space so that the air, warm air that you are producing from your body temperature warms you up back. So
Thank you,
that's why
Oyungerel.
that's why misconceptions are usually underestimating their
Underestimating the weather. I'll keep that in mind if I ever come to Ulaanbaatar, or I'll drop you a note before that. But we actually need to go further in depth into the discussion. I still think, though, it would be useful for our audience if you told us in really briefly 1 minute, what is your background? When you told me during our prep discussion, I thought that was really interesting. You told me what you studied and when did you study, and which phase, and how the country developed. So can you tell us that in a very brief fashion, and then we go on and we can deepen it more.
Yeah. I'm now 55 years old, and I grew up during communist time, and I spent half of my childhood as a nomadic herder, because during summertime, during especially communist time, you have to be free labor for nomadic herders. So I spent 12 summers doing full-time herding work. And I studied in Soviet Union during Andropov's, Chernenko's, and Gorbachev's time. And when I graduated from Soviet Union, I received like a red diploma, which means like a best diploma with honor, in specializing in planning economy. But after I graduated from Soviet Union, planning economy collapsed in Mongolia and democracy started, and I re-educated myself. During Yeltsin's time, I again went to Russia to study market economy, and then later I studied at Stanford University in international policy studies. So also after Stanford, I studied at Yale University for a non-degree program. So I have 2 American and 2 Russian school experience.
That's great. I think that gives a lot of insight to the audience to understand your...
And also I'm a first generation Democrat. So in Mongolians, when Mongolia switched to democracy, I was just 25, and I was really young, enthusiastic, and just decided to protect democracy, make our country more democratic, and that's what I'm spending.
Great. Now let us hear more from both of you about precisely these kind of topics by going in depth into the main issues up for discussion. So the first one I want to address with the two of you is the topic of nomadic traditions and modernity, which you both have already touched upon, right? So when people think of Mongolia, as you both said, the first thing that comes to mind for many is probably the nomadic lifestyle, a valued tradition with a very long history, as you both pointed out. So today, about 1/4 of Mongolian households is still leading life as nomadic herders. So I would like to start with you, Oyungerel. You grew up as a herder girl in the communist era, as you said, and you were studying economy when Mongolia, as you just told us, started transitioning to a market economy in the 1990s. How do you think these big economic reforms have affected nomadic lives in the past decades?
In the past 3 decades, before democracy, herders' life were kind of a semi-labor camp style kind of life. Herders were least paid people with most work and most punished workforce in Mongolia, because any loss of animal were harshly punished, and herders actually didn't have a right to spend their herds for themselves, and they had many bureaucratic stages in order to be able to consume some meat and milk from the cooperative animals. So in 1991, when livestock was privatized, the freedom that nomadic herders received were enormous. They had much richer lifestyle. They have freedom to consume and sell all the nomadic products, herding products, and they had freedom to travel and freedom to choose their place of stay. And they just generally have way more paid, started having way more paid lifestyle. Whatever they worked went as an income for them, and nobody punished them for losing a couple of sheep for wolves, for example. Nobody was threatening you to send you to jail if you missed milking a couple of days of cows, because if there was raining, they don't milk cows. But during communist time, you have to milk cows every day, because if you lose that milk, you will be punished. So lifestyle of the nomadic hoarder become freer, less pressured, and just way more traditionally, closer to tradition and relaxed. Mm-hmm. So that said that the livestock amount just increased like mushroom. During communist time, Mongolia never had more than 25 million livestock on our land. But after the privatization, our livestock increased till 70 million. so it's just tripled. So because the livestock is so increased, now new style of problem is arising in front of nomadic hoarders, which is overgrazing, desertification, drought, disappearance of rivers, and family separation for schooling their children. And because the animals require more and more land for pasture, there's a land disputes between farmers and with miners, etc. So there is a more modern problems that they are facing, some of which is caused by global warming and desertification.
Thank you for pointing that out. That would have been my second question, but you have already brilliantly replied to that. So since you also mentioned schooling, right, and these kind of issues for nomadic families, Imia, I would like to ask you, what about better access to social services like education, for example, is another important motivation, as we know, in general, for people to migrate from rural areas to the cities. So in the case of Mongolia, Binia, what does schooling look like for the average nomadic child? What challenges are these families facing? And is there any, for example, kind of homeschooling? We'll touch upon the COVID era also in a second, but please.
So yeah, one thing I like about Mongolian parents, they want their children to have a better education. So they want their kids to study very good high schools and very good public schools. And what's happening here is that, okay, so we do have high schools around the countryside in different provinces, but like the students who's living in rural area, and sometimes they have to go miles and miles, kilometers to reach to their schools. Sometimes they stay in schooling houses. So what interesting thing, so that's kind of the imagination that we used to have in general. Okay, so we go in the respective high schools, especially students, high school kids, go into the respective high schools, whatever convenient for them. But what we noticed in the city is that a lot of parents, especially like from the herder family, father stays with their livestock and mother migrate to the city with the kids, spend the school year there, and that also amounts to the traffic jam Mongolia is facing at the moment. So in the city, the traffic is very bad. And what this week is actually the spring holiday for the high schools. And what we notice is that there is no traffic. I was at my office coming back to my home, usually because of traffic, it takes like 40 minutes. But I came here within 10 minutes. I had time to settle here. So it shows that the schooling, it kind of shows that, the system itself, schooling system itself needs to be improved. And because a lot of, depending on the school quality, a lot of parents are bringing the kids to different district high school, or a lot of parents are like daily basis going back in the traffic, bringing the kids, bringing them, taking back home. So those are the signs we clearly see that affects to our traffic here, and which also shows that parents are preferring different schools than where they're living. Like when I was high school kid in Mongolia, my high school was like 50 minutes walking distance from my home. My parents never need to drive me to my high school and come back. So this was the system back then. Like, where you live, where you appointed, you can have attended the high schools. Same thing with countryside. If you're in one province, you can attend to the province high school there. But now, because of the the changes, because of this kind of transition, parents are like bringing the kids, and because a lot of I do believe we have a lot of room to improve in education industry, but I think because of we have very shortage of good teachers, we have a shortage of good teachers in terms of high school. So that's why a lot of parents are choosing the teachers over high school. That's why joining them. And then, to be honest, we don't have a lot of homeschooling. Usually, the Mongolian parents, they think being part of society, participating in the classroom activities with other students can also very benefit for the kids. So a lot of parents not necessarily choose homeschooling. So those are the challenges in education right now we're facing.
Right. So actually this brings me to my second question, which is connected to what you just said, which is, of course, homeschooling. So through most of the COVID-19 pandemic, Mongolia actually shut down schools and really fully shifted public education to distance learning, right? And the channels used, as I have read, included TV and the internet. And of course, we know that many households do not have access to electricity or to the internet due to the lack of either the infrastructure or financial means. So Bimya, for you, the question is, what do you think was the impact, if you can gauge that, of the pandemic on education and on digital divide? And was there an impact, for example, on the most vulnerable, maybe rural parts of the population and on their children?
Yeah. So last 2 years, especially, I myself working in education industry for the last years, and I've known a lot of when there is there is no classes for at least one semester or something, there is a lot of lacking we can see in the kids, because we usually work with kids from 13 to 18 years old in at FARA Foundation when we teach digital literacy. So now, because of COVID, it's been 2 years, everything was going online. So when everything is going online, as you've said, for the rural areas, the infrastructure was the challenging part. And then, so the government trying to put all the classes on the TV, but not necessarily every household has a TV. So it was very challenging for the students to actually attend those classes. And then also the internet. Internet is the biggest infrastructure problem we facing in the rural areas, especially at countryside, because when it's lockdown, when usually students, when they go to city, a province center or municipal area, they can actually access to have internet, but when they actually go to their home in the rural area, there is no TVs, there's no internet. So I can see we are having these 2 years kind of lost. And then I think we will see the consequences in the following years, because I myself has a little niece who just, when pandemic started, he was in the first grade. And by the time when you graduate first grade, you should be able to read the Mongolian alphabetic letters. But now, because of COVID, they stayed home for 2 years. And then when they start this year, schooling year in the third grade, he was not able to read. And that's very common for all these young kids. And then also the university students as well. One of my another relatives, studying in medicine in Mongolia. And then medicine is such a high prioritized profession where you have to be practicing there, but you're doing it 3 years, 2 years online, it's gonna be disastrous. And then he graduated, having 2 years online and having classes in 2 years and then graduate. So in a way, the education industry affected so much. And then what we see is that, of course, every country was having problem. Every country was not ready for this kind of shift, but we have to do it, because of the situations. And then another unintended consequence happened is that, because when everything goes online, a lot of students spending time on the computer. So in regular places, when kids go to school, they participate in a classroom with other students, talk face-to-face with teachers. But when they start studying from home, and when they're learning with the virtual environment, they spend a lot of time on the computer. And then usually when parents, they see the kids spend a lot of time on the computer and tablets, or cell phones, they would say, hey, you shouldn't spend it this amount of time, you should stop it. But now, because they have excuse to use those kind of devices, which means they spend a lot of time on the internet, and that also brings big challenges in digital literacy. That's how our foundation, we will start teaching how to have these kind of education to navigate in virtual environment and internet environment. So those are the challenges we have at the moment.
You mentioned that also the issue of cyberbullying, which was something that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Exactly. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Oyungerel, I would have a question for you now. Based on besides your political and your human rights work, you're also a successful writer. And through your novels, you're also educating the Mongolian youth about the country's history and culture. So my question could be, first of all, can you tell us a bit more about your record-selling novel, The Green-Eyed Llama? What is it about?
Oh, thank you for asking this question. So Green-Eyed Llama is about Stalinist time for political murder, purges, and Mongolian kind of Holocaust occurred in Mongolia in 1930s. Right before World War II. So not so many people know that under Stalin's direct instruction, Mongolian government purged its own people, 5% of its own population, and just eliminated everybody who exercised Buddhism and who were Buryats and who were descendants of Genghis Khan. So that was a politically organized, long massacre happened in Mongolia, and Mongolian history books were not teaching about it. And my generation grew up not knowing anything about it. My mother's generation didn't know anything about it, and the generation that suffered from this purge was my grandmother's generation. So I interviewed my grandmother in 1997 after Mongolia, for the first time, approved a law to pardon everybody who was sentenced as a criminalist. So Green-Eyed Llama is a historic novel based on my family's story. It's a Lama. Protagonist is the victim of political purge, and The Green-Eyed Llama is a big novel, but it to attract young people to read about Mongolian tragic history, I put a lot of love story in it. So it's actually a love story, and through love story, it tells about the tragic history happened to the great-grandparents. And it is available in French and available in English. And if you Google The Green-Eyed Llama, the book will come out on many markets.
I did it. I also want to order it. It sounds like a very interesting novel, especially after what you explained to us, which is really something that I think most people really ignore. And it's a very important thing that you did there. Since we don't have so much time and you do amazing work with your NGOs, I would like to shift the conversation onto what you really are doing with your civil society organizations. Now, you both have established NGOs with very different goals, but you have some common fundamental aims, as I understood you, right? You want to raise awareness about certain issues, and you were also adamant that you want to break specific taboos, right? That you address issues that Mongolian society feels uncomfortable with. So maybe, Oyungerel, let's talk about the breaking taboos part, right? With your NGO, Local Solutions, you managed to do that by leading what you called a true toilet revolution in Mongolia. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Oh, yes. Our NGO called Local Solutions, and our team initiated this project called Let's Change Our Toilets. And nobody wanted to say the word toilet in Mongolian language, because Jorlong in Mongolian language symbolizes that you don't have good toilet and you have pit outhouses, which would even marginalize you as a person who is not connected to grid and not well enough, etc. So the just saying that word has stigma in it, attached to in it. We didn't if nobody can say this word, nobody is going to tackle the issue. So I actually wrote a book called Let's Change Our Toilet, using the word that was actually a taboo. And our team made a nationwide education campaign, how to improve our toilets and how to change our toilets. And our project's been going on for 5 years, and we're still continuing to change the project. And we know that in Mongolia, we have about 600,000 pit-out houses that need to be changed. But we believe that only businesses can do the best changes, and only through businesses, we can have sustainable toilet change. But no businesses wanted to tackle the issue. So in order to make sure that toilet business is okay and toilet business can be good business, our project is actually developing all kinds of products, business models, and exercises showing the business world that toilet can be sold, toilets can be advertised, toilets can be good products, and model can sit on the toilet and do some promotions, etc. So we are kind of normalizing the word toilet and normalizing the product, the toilet product. But our project also has an environmental goal, not to use water. So our toilet should be very environmentally friendly, and that's why we adopted Finnish model of dry toilet that can be installed indoors. So adapting the word toilet, then adapting a dry toilet, then adapting it inside the house and inside the home requires lots of public education work. So that's what we're doing. And we are doing it with involvement of social enterprise model. But social enterprise has a tiny little margin, so we don't finance ourselves from toilet selling. So what we finance from is we are financed from donations, sponsorship for our annual, sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly expenses, etc.
Right. Thank you very much. I think it's very important, especially when I read the articles, that some of the links about this project, also to understand how many people, for example, also drown because there are simply no modern toilets, and they just do it into a pit, and with the floodings, I mean, it is really also a social safety issue. So I think it's really important work that you do. Unfortunately, the time is running out, so I'd like to briefly address, before we go into the Q&A section of the webinar, the last part of our conversation. Now, since Mongolia's democratic transition, the country, we know, has achieved a relatively robust civic freedoms, and the expanding civil society sector has played a vital role, as you both showed, in the country's democratic development, right? So since 2019, draft laws have been proposed that may limit NGOs' freedoms and rights to an increased state interference, right? So I would like to ask you, have these laws been passed by now? And what would the adoption of these laws mean for NGOs like yours? Maybe Bimya, let's start with you.
Oh, okay.
If it's okay.
Okay, yeah. So our Faro Foundation have been up and running for 5 years, and then we didn't have, back in time, we were talking about this kind of legislation will pass, but to be honest, it hasn't. So which means, as an NGO, we do have a lot of freedom to move around and partner with different organizations. Like, for example, at Faro Foundation, we work with Ministry of Education, we work with Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, and we work with Ministry of Information and Technology. So also we work with like UN and UNICEF, to deliver modern training. So in a way, we can see that there is a lot of freedom to move around and collaborate with different other organizations. And if you start regulating NGO and as in civil society, I personally wouldn't like that. So it's kind of like, because it's a social enterprise, we are doing for the public good, we are doing for the benefit of the country. So in a way, we didn't wanna. I to be honest, I didn't see the legislation paper for myself. Maybe Ms. Oyungerel have seen it, but to start, if you start regulating these kind of civil society organizations, it might have a backlash. So that's my opinion.
Absolutely. Oyungerel, do you also have an opinion on this? I would also like to ask you briefly about how Mongolia abolished the death penalty and the kind of role civil society played in that.
Mm-hmm. So I'll combine both questions. So in terms of first question, the NGO law, and I am leading NGOs fight against those new drafts that Parliament is about to debate. Actually, Parliament wanted to pass two laws called the legal status of associations and law on legal status on foundations. So those laws are actually eliminating the word non-governmental organization from all legislations of Mongolia. So we opposed it, we protested it in November and managed to stop it to be discussed by Parliament in autumn session. But during spring session, this Parliament wants to adopt this law, but we are still resisting the law. We are still speaking against the law. So far it's not in the agenda. So it's there. Proposals are there to be ready to be discussed and debated, but the NGOs are always here to oppose those laws. So we are watchdogging so that these laws are not passed. If these laws are passed, the environment for non-governmental organizations will be completely wrong, because the government will allow only friendly NGOs to exist, and watchdogs, centers, and the organizations that usually litigate against government decisions for the public interest will have no room to operate. So that's why the new legislations are limiting the civic spaces, and limiting the forms that citizens can create the associations, and they're limiting the activities that we can do for our interests and for public interests. So that's why the new legislations are very communist oriented, trying to make Mongolian civil society similar to Russians and Belarusians civil society. That's why we are openly opposing it. And one difference Mongolia has from our two neighbors is that we are freedom, we are democracy, and we openly protect it. We have to openly protect it. We openly say it. This is one of our values that we have, one of our differences that we have in this region. So like our Mongolian Dale is different from their national costume, and like our language is different from Chinese and Russian language, our freedom and democracy is a homegrown democracy, so that we grew it ourselves and we nourish it ourselves, and we have to protect it ourselves. So that's why we speak openly against the government proposal, Parliament proposal these days.
And it's even more important due to the undemocratic backsliding that we see in many countries. Of course, it's important that you do that. Well, the last question, if you could do that a bit briefly, and then I open the floor to the discussion from the public, was the one about the abolishment of the death penalty and what kind of role civil society played in it.
Abolishment of the death penalty was actually led by the president of that time. So in the beginning, it wasn't a big civil society push, but it was led by President Elbegdorj. And I worked for him as a human rights advisor. And it was also my proposal for president to do this. And then there was legislators like Temujin and like other legislators who also led the movement to continue their fight on the parliament. And we managed to pass UN Convention Against Death Penalty. We managed to pass criminal law that doesn't have death penalty, but we still have the word death penalty in our constitution. So we are not the country that constitutionally abolished death penalty. We abolished death penalty on our criminal code. So at that level, we abolished. So the long way of changing all the way is still ahead. But after higher political leaders led the death penalty movement, the civil society actually picked up very quickly, and there were lots of civil society initiatives in support of death penalty. Also, there was a big backlash from the judicial part after the death penalty after the moratorium on death penalty was first exercised in Mongolia in 2010, that year court sentenced death penalty most of the time because they just backlashed all kinds of court decisions were on death penalty. But after death penalty was abolished by law, even the next president, Batulga, wanted to reintroduce death penalty and openly spoke about it. And at that time, from 2017 to 2021, civil society and citizens were outspokenly pressuring the president not to do that and successfully managed to stop that.
Right. Thank you very much for this. Now, I'd like to open the question, to open the floor to the questions of the public. There is one which has been asked now and is very similar to the question that one of the speakers from the Singapore episode also asked you. And that would be, as a country wedged in between Russia and China, how is the changing China-Russia relationship affecting Mongolia? I don't know who would like to go first, or
I think Ms. Oyungerel will have much more interesting insight on that question.
As a politician.
As a politician, a former politician.
So, neighborhood, being a neighbor, being next door with Russia and China has prepared Mongolian politicians and Mongolian citizens to live always on our toes, I think. So we always have these neighbors. We always faced issues from both neighbors, and it will not disappear anytime soon. So for us, it's like a state of living, a state of existence. So we shouldn't panic on every changes these two neighbors make in their countries. But as a country, we have adopted a kind of immunity of existence during various regimes of these countries. So, of course, this is a high alert time for us because Russia initiated war against Ukraine and China closed its border and also seemingly panicked over COVID. And that is totally making our life difficult because in terms of financial transactions, physical logistics of travel and physical logistics of goods, trade, etc. And also in terms of just having a mood, the mood of the country is also a little under shadow of these two countries. So, but we have to summon our historic resistance, historic traditional immunity in order to overcome various periods of development of two neighbors. Of course, it would be ideal if our two neighbors become free, relaxed, and non-aggressive countries. But until such time, we are doing our best. We are doing our best and trying to navigate and trying to keep our identity, history, culture, language, economy, and of course, our democracy and freedom.
And this brings me actually to combine two other questions which go along this line for you, which have come in. The first one asks, how strong are the democratic values rooted in Mongolian society and politics, especially in the context of your giant neighbors being autocratic? And the second one, which I think follows up nicely, asks about Mongolia's relationship with other fellow democracies in East Asia, such as South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. Would you like to take that, Oyungerel? Unless Bimia would like to take that.
No, yeah. I think she will give you a much more interesting answer. I do have an opinion, but I rather
actually, I also want to listen to Byamba because Byamba is born in a free country, raised in a free country. I was born in a communist country. If somebody asks me roots, my democratic roots starts from age 25, and we created our homegrown democracy. We participated in every inch of movement, So for me, it's not about roots. It's about creation. It's about how we did it. But for Byamba, I would like to listen to her roots
Yeah,
in democracy.
Okay, so maybe, this is might be interesting. So when my mom was carrying me, when she was pregnant with me, like 6 months, she was actually in the main square and the democratic process. And remember, Ms. Oyungerel, when in 1990 they had this protest happening.
Yes, yes.
So I was the kid who actually conceived during this period. So yes,
Oh.
yeah. So my mom was also like very hardcore democratic, and she was like, although she was pregnant with me, she was on this main square. Sitting there and protesting with my dad too. So in a way, I come from very democratic family myself, and then I grew up learning about socialism. But yes, I am like product of Mongolian young democracy, and we are very, very democratic. We, compared to our previous ancestors, we do have a lot of voices to express in ourselves, and especially social media enables us. So if you see a lot of young generations, whether if we don't like any decision that government makes, if we don't like any other policies that they're passing, things that happened before we were born, or unjust for the stuff that happened without us acknowledging. So those things all exploded on social media.
And Bimia, do you see any linkages between civil society and the youth, and with, for example, the Milk Tea Alliance or other civil society in East Asia?
Well, yeah, I do think, because since the internet of things happened, this escalates this democracy, and it gives voice to democracy. So this is not only happening in Mongolia; it's also happening to East Asian countries and any other democratic countries. So young people start having voices, or like people like us, who can actually use social media tools, platforms, Facebook, Instagram, to express their opinions as freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So this is happening everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of Asian democracies, I would like to quickly add. In terms of Asian democracies, I think Mongolia, when we turned into democracy, when we started our democracy, we were very connected to the Berlin Wall fall. So East European democratic changes were happening at the same time when Mongolian changes were happening. So we were very connected to Poland and Eastern European countries, and receiving their information way more than the East Asian democracy news. So we were located in the same Asian continent. When we did our transition, we were closer to the Eastern European countries than to the Asian countries. But once we already did our transition, our economic ties actually increased more toward Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, and all other Asian democracies were all very connected. And Japan has a very, very special role in Mongolian democracy, not just for democracy, but for our market economy, because when Mongolia made our transition, we made the simultaneous transition politically and economically, from communism to democracy, and from centrally planned economy to market economy. So when market economy started, and we did these changes before Soviet Union collapsed. So because Soviet Union was still communist during the first 2 years of our democracy, they actually boycotted us, and they cut all the connections, and we didn't have any foreign aid except Japan. So Japan actually was our adopted during pre-market economy, our adopted
so it
sustained
Mongolia.
Sustained us during the most difficult winters of first years of democracy.
Okay, so
we have very, very, very close
relationship,
special history about that.
That's great. I had no idea about that. That's very interesting to me. And unfortunately, I would like to go on more in depth, but we are really running out. Actually, we have run out of time already. Can I ask you one really very fast answer to 2 last questions? Your favorite place and food in Mongolia, and what's the best thing to read or watch? from both of you.
Okay, go ahead, Miss Angel.
Oh, favorite places to go. I go to one day of Mongolia restaurant a lot in Byambajargal Hotel. It is a tiny little restaurant with affordable price, but has lots of Mongolian food in it, and it's a very good lunch place for me. But my husband always goes to Milis, which is an American, Cuban, Mongolian place, and it's his everyday lunch place, and it has lots of Western style Cuban, Mongolian, American food.
Right.
So there are a variety of places.
And the best thing to read or watch about Mongolia?
Best thing to read the Green-Eyed Llama,
Yeah.
of course. And then, of course, you can read other new books about Mongolian young, Kazakh, Mongolian eagle huntress, the book called The Eagle Huntress. And also, if you are interested in Mongolian history, there are plenty of books on Mongolian history of Genghis Khan time, but modern history is really well wrapped by Babur's book, History of Mongolia.
Okay. And what about you, Bimia? Can you give us a quick answer to these questions?
Yeah,
Food and...
because like any other country, Mongolia has a lot of different cuisines, like Indians and Chinese and Koreans. But funny thing is, I like to go to Milis as well with Miss Angel's husband. I always run into him every day. So the food is very good here. So I would recommend them. And then the book, I would definitely recommend Miss Oyungerel's Green-Eyed Llama book, because through that book, I kind of fascinated with Mongolian history. Although I was reading I was reading stories, but then I was learning so much about the history of the country. So that was very good. That was a very good read. And things to watch in Mongolia, maybe like things to do here is sightseeing is very beautiful. I like to go to countryside. So Khubskul province, the lake is the purest water there. So.
Okay.
And Gobi is beautiful.
Yeah, Gobi.
Yeah.
Well,
and everywhere in countryside is beautiful. Really, landscape is really different. But when you come to Mongolia, you have to choose your direction, whether to Gobi or to the north of Khubskul and Hanga provinces, or east, flat steppe, or far west, high-rise, high mountains. So
I will certainly make sure to contact you before I come, so I don't get lost in a country of 3 million people, the same size of Iran. Otherwise, that would be difficult. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. I would like to thank you both very much for these great insights today. Bimia and Oyungerel, thank you to all of you who joined us. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.